I really believe if you're going to have kids, raise the kids. Otherwise, don't have kids. And not everybody has to have kids. But I took time off work to be with my kids, and I worked less hours when my kids were small. And I did attend all of their activities, and I made sure that I set up my work so that I could do that. And I know that not everybody can, but those are things that you can work toward and be able to accomplish, especially as a driven person.
Hi, Janelle. We're so excited to have you here today. I'm going to flip the script today. I'm going to say, why don't you introduce yourself and tell us who you are and a little bit about yourself?
Who am I? I guess I would start with I'm a daughter, and I'm a sister and a mother and a wife, an author and an entrepreneur. So I have done a lot of things in my life. I think I've been certainly a driven person and didn't really realize, I think, until reading your book, how innate that was. And that was just part of really my makeup. And I think that I drove some people a little crazy in my life with that, but it's also been very beneficial too. And I've really just leaned in to being a driven entrepreneur and a driven individual, and also learning how to adapt to others around me to actually be a better leader to them by learning how to speak in their own language versus speaking for my own driven self.
So tell us a little bit about your driven journey. How did you realize you were driven?
I'm not sure if I knew I was different, but I know my mom did. As I said, I know I drove my mom crazy. I had a tremendous amount of energy, and kind of a funny story. When I was quite young, probably, I don't know, 10 or 12, she actually took me to the doctor because she thought something was wrong with me. She said, I just can't get Janelle to settle down. She is always just full of energy and always wanting to do something and so active. And she thought that something was wrong with me. And the doctor said, this is just how she is. She's perfectly healthy. She has great energy, and she's going to do some big things someday. So I think that helped encourage my
Okay.
my mom a little bit. But she's told me even from the nursery that I was the leader in the nursery, that the nursery attendants would say, wow, she's bossing everybody around in the nursery. And then in grade school, I had a teacher who sought me out when I was in the second grade and asked me to be a mentor to a first grader that was coming in from another country and didn't know the language. And she wanted me to read with her and spend time with her. And that was just a huge honor for me to be able to do that. And I think that was the first time that I went, wow, I get to help someone else. I get to come alongside someone else and help to lead them and help them to be comfortable. And it was, I think, started really there, and in different leadership roles as I grew up. And then it just seemed natural to begin starting my own businesses because I wasn't real good at working for other people.
So you dodged a bullet. Had that doctor said, "Oh no, she has ADHD. We have to get her on meds. We have to special classes." I mean, all of that. You're like me. You're of the older
Yeah, like,
ADHD.
did you exist? Like, yeah, did medication exist then? Because, like, even I'm pretty young and medication wasn't subscribed yet when I was growing up, at least not in my community. Uh,
Right.
do you think it's a disservice that we're doing to our kids now, subscribing medication so fast for anybody that even looks ADD?
100% yes. It is a complete disservice. And there's some really wonderful doctors out there, but traditional medicine is making these diagnoses based on symptoms versus what's really going on, how somebody is made up, or what else may even be going on in their brain and bodies. I mean, even somebody that's being diagnosed with depression is caused by something else that's going on. And the doctor's fix is, oh, you're exhibiting signs that look like depression. This is depression. Let's give you antidepressants. And it's definitely a disservice. And I think that there's a lot of things that should be done first before you are looking at medicating. Things like even testing for allergies, food sensitivities, because as you guys know, nutrition is just so key in how you operate. And sometimes some of those symptoms are exhibiting because of the type of food that's being put in our kids' bodies. And I didn't know. When I was growing up, I was really fortunate that I was raised on a dairy farm, and everything was, I mean, we were drinking milk from the tank, and we raised our own food. And so I was really eating quite healthy when I was growing up. I had these wonderful packed lunches that my mom had made with all of these homemade things that she had done with her own hands, where other kids had peanut butter and jelly sandwiches, and they were so jealous of my lunch. And they didn't know they were doing anything different, I think. And it, like you said, it wasn't until I think our kids' generation where we really were offering a lot more processed foods and not really realizing that, and seeing these symptoms, putting kids on medications.
How did the dairy farm support your driven nature?
You know, my parents were really supportive. My dad was an entrepreneur as a dairy farmer, and I never realized what he had on his plate until I grew up and was running businesses myself. And I was actually able to interview him on his 91st birthday of what it was like to be an entrepreneur. And as a child, my dad didn't show that aspect of himself because he was so dedicated to his family, family first. And I've been that same way, really, because of how he taught me. But he would go out after, he would come every night in for dinner. We would have dinner together as a family. And then after dinner, kids would have to go do homework or whatever. And my dad, I didn't really realize, was going back out to the barn to do his chores, and would often just keep working into the night to get all of his work done. And I'm sure he would have rather just keep going so he could finish and be done. But he was so committed to us as kids that he came in and was really a part of our lives. And he was such a part of our lives and involved in everything, despite being an entrepreneur, that I think that really helped us to be self-assured in who we are. And even though my mom had that moment, and they always thought I was full of this over excessive energy, they didn't count it against me. I think my mom was worried about me. She prayed over me because my personality very different from her. Middle child, very much servant-hearted, coming alongside, a supporter, that type of person. But yet they loved me, and I deeply felt their love and support, and they let me go after the things I wanted to go after.
Yeah, they gave you that autonomy and that freedom. Brothers,
Right.
sisters, are they driven? Older, younger?
My mom and dad had 2 kids. They always wanted to have 4, but with my brother that's older than me, 11 and 9 years older, she had some difficulty with the pregnancy and was told she couldn't have any more kids. So that wasn't good enough. And so 10 years later, she adopted me and as a baby, and then my sister 4 years later. So I really am a firstborn in coming into this family. I was the third child, but yet, 9 years later. So I would say my siblings are not driven, and I would say that my mom and dad also would not be considered driven. I would say I'm the only one in my family that was like that. And the benefits of that is that I think because I was in a loving home growing up, that like you said, Doug, I had the opportunity to have autonomy. It naturally put me in leadership roles that are sometimes a burden now, and I look at it as a privilege, but it can feel like a heavy burden at times too. Even though I'm in the middle of the pack of my family, I've always been the one that they've come to and looked to solve the problems, to lead them out of a situation. And now that my dad has passed, my siblings just, well, what are we doing? You're taking care of mom. You've got all this, right? And I'm the executor, and I'm the caregiver for my mom and making sure her finances are all okay. And my siblings have just naturally expected that I would take that role. So I think family dynamics, when you have that mix, that happens.
I was just thinking back to every group project I did at school, and hell no, I'm not being in charge of this. And every single time you wind up in charge. Why do you think drivens naturally fall into that or put into that leadership role? What is it about us, do you think?
Well, there's always that conversation of, are you born a leader, or are you trained into being a leader? And I firmly believe you're born a leader, and it's just a natural piece of us. It's naturally in our DNA that we're going to step up and lead if leadership is needed. And I'm okay with not being the one in charge, but like you say, others look to you to do that. And if things aren't going well, then I'll be in charge to make sure we get on the right track and we're all going in the same direction. I feel that would drive me nuts if you've got a leader in charge who's not leading.
It's the natural, I mean, we are born for chaos. And that big picture thinking, I think it suits us really well. But we have a tendency, though, to be condescending and be scary to others. And it's something I'm working on for my next book is when you're leading sheep, there's two ways to get a bunch of sheep to do what you want them to do. One is the driver at the back of the flock has a big stick and it scares the shit out of them and bangs the stick and tells them what to do. The other is the shepherd at the front of the flock and they follow the leader. Same big stick, but it's got a gentle swoop on the end. Coming from that loving home, I mean, your father offered good leadership, huh?
Absolutely.
How'd you learn to lead?
Well, I definitely give huge credit to my dad in that. And like I said, I didn't really realize that when I was growing up. I just saw all of the things that he was doing in his life. And he led from a very servant-hearted way. He was never pushy in his leadership, just as you described.
Servant heart. What does that mean to you?
Servant-hearted means to me that you're looking out for the needs of others, not being an opportunist just for yourself. That you want the team to win, not you to win. And whether that's your family, whether that's a team that you're leading in some way at work, that you want them to win. And when you talked about, it's really awesome that you're going to be writing a book on this subject. We can tend to be poor leaders when we exhibit control and force in the way that we're leading, which is can naturally, when we're not at our best selves, you and I will be very controlling, irritating people. And even when we're at our best selves, one of the managers that I had that worked for me, who I deeply appreciate on my executive team, said to me one day after a meeting, and he said, Janelle, you don't realize how much power you have just by walking into a room, and that you need to be aware of that for your people. And what he meant by that is that sometimes when we come with this confidence that we have and we know the way and we're ready to work together to help guide others there, that it can be too strong. And we think differently, as you know, as a driven person. And so rather, I learned that the people that I was leading and that were part of my team were not wired like me for the most part, that wanted just to speak out all of our problems and let's talk about this and let's have conflict and let's talk it through and then we're going to move on. Or I would say, let's brainstorm this right now, you guys, come on, let's go. And I would completely overwhelm them with all of my ideas and where I wanted to go. And I learned that that was not the way to lead them, that they needed time, and especially certain people on my team. So I had one person who was very much an introspective thinker, liked to really process things first. And so I would say, John, I've got this idea I want to talk to you about it. Let me just kind of give you the framework about it. And then can you think on these points and then let's schedule a meeting to get together later this week. Then we would have an amazing meeting because he had time to actually think and process versus me trying to force him to, come on, what's your gut instinct? Tell me what you think.
The word that came up for me was intimidating. Do you think driven women tend to be more intimidating than driven guys?
I think so.
Why are you laughing?
Why am I laughing?
Yeah.
It's one of my passions in this world is to help women, driven women in particular, really own their power. And you guys are always so shocked to find out how scary you are.
That's exactly where I'm going, because we've been discussing this a lot. And one of the things that we want to get to in this season is talking more about driven women and how driven women are different than driven men. And we've spoken about like driven women looking sometimes more angry or wanting to stand out versus driven males wanting to fit in. But something new that I'm hearing is maybe it's not anger. Maybe it's we look so intimidating, we don't even realize it. We don't even see ourselves.
That's a really great point. I would say that I used to not see myself as how I came across with the confidence that I had. And that confidence, I believe, is intimidating to people. And I wasn't able to resonate with a lot of the self-doubt and imposter syndrome, which I see just as much in men as I do in women. I work a lot with men and think a lot like a man. I believe without getting deep in the emotions of it, I want to find out the facts, figure it out, and let's move forward and get things done. And I didn't realize until I started taking some personality assessments, and we did this with my leadership team, and I did this with other leaders. And that's where, like your test, your driven test, Doug, it's like, whoa, you see that on paper and go, wow, there is something different here. And we do a Brackmann assessment as one of the things that we're certified in. And it's a wonderful assessment as well that really shows how people are different and wired differently, and what are the emotional needs that are below the surface that you don't even see are happening. And I think with the driven nature, that I would be more afraid to fail. That's probably my bigger fear than it is to be liked. Where I think other people who aren't wired like a driven personality may have more issues with, do they like me? Do I fit in? Do I belong? Not that belonging isn't really important.
The dynamic between my two daughters, my 17-year-old wants to be a aeronautical engineer, straight A student, 4.7 GPA. I mean, just on it. And she really cares what other people think about her. My 15-year-old, who was the first one to the top of a 12-foot rope ladder in gymnastics when she was 4, but that she's not competing with others, she's competing with herself. And that internalization of it, she's too much into that to give a crap what other people think. She really, it's like I'm working on something that matters more to me internally than something that matters to me externally. And so it's a very interesting. Is that true for both of you guys?
You know how I call it, right? Being self-focused versus other focused. So self-focused people find internal validation versus other focused people find external validation. Self-focused people tend to be more driven because they're goal-oriented. What happens is, though, that they're so hyper-focused on their goal, which makes them stand out and be different and not fit in. So then they end up in the pain of not fitting in, looking different, looking intimidating. Imagine, Janelle, you go to a wedding and there's a whole bunch of women there, right? And you're the driven entrepreneur, and then 10 others are stay-at-home moms. How do you feel in that environment?
Exactly. Well, yeah.
That's been my environment my entire life. I guess I learned to connect with others that aren't like me in ways that we are aligned. So when my kids were small, most of my kids' friends and my good friends were stay-at-home moms. And I was an entrepreneur, full-time running a business and being a mom, a single mom, in fact. So that created some more difficulty. It was hard on my kids. It was hard on my kids because I was the mom that was working and their friends' moms were home. There wasn't a comparison there. We'd say, I can't say, and going back to that inside focus versus others focus, is that I wasn't worried about how I was, the differences there. I was looking for where we had alignment. We were moms that cared deeply about our kids. We believed we were here for a purpose. We believed that God was over our lives. We cared very much about how our kids grew up and that they felt loved and that they were being treated well, that they were getting opportunities to explore their gifts. We looked at those things and how we were aligned, and I do that today. So my girlfriends and guy friends who are not, and I kind of put entrepreneur and driven together because most of the entrepreneurs that I know are driven. In Genius Network that Doug and I, you and I both are part of, there's some crazy entrepreneurs, and a lot of them, majority of them are driven. And you look for those qualities that you can connect on, because I realized early on, Rachel, that I was going to have conversations with some of those girlfriends about my new project at work, my new thing that I was really excited about. And they tried to maybe listen and understand, but they really didn't get it. So it didn't really make sense to have those conversations like that with them. So instead, my entrepreneurial friends, women and men, would be who I had those conversations with and got those needs met with. So I guess that's how I did it.
How did you find them at first? There's that period where
Right.
being 30 as an entrepreneur where you really are isolated. It's a hell existence.
right.
Feel left out, you are left out. You don't care really you don't want to go to a dinner party and talk about diapers. I mean, it's not something that you're,
Exactly. Yeah.
yeah, where did you meet your first? Did you always be part of masterminds? How'd you hear about it?
No, for a long time. And I think that's one of my biggest pieces of advice to women who are entrepreneurial and driven is to find your people like that. And it probably started with some older women and men finding me and seeing a little bit of them in me. And I remember single mom showing up at church one day after a really hard week. I was exhausted. There were challenges at work. Trying to every minute I wasn't at work, I was chaperoning my girls around, and I was just tired. I remember she came down and sat with me, very successful businesswoman, and she said, "Janelle, do you realize you don't have to do it all? You don't have to keep trying to do it all. Just because these other moms take care of everything in their home doesn't mean that you have to." And it was a lifesaver to me to actually bring somebody in to clean my home.
Wow.
And I want to give you permission to do things like that because you can. And then when you're home, you can really just be present with your kids. And that was like this light bulb to me. Because I thought, oh my goodness, my mom always cleaned our home all the time. So I mean, I can't pay somebody to bring somebody in to help me with chores. I mean, I should be able to take care of my own home. I just had no clue, and everybody around me was taking care of their own home. So it wasn't until another business professional came to me and gave me permission to do that.
What would
And
you say to moms that get their drivenness and perfect mom thing? You guys see that too, where they super mom. It always angers me when someone says I'm just a mom. What do you mean just? It's like I couldn't do it.
yeah,
Most driven women that are locked in with two, a newborn, a 2, and a 4, you're completely isolated. It's a hell existence. It's miserable.
I think the good news is that I see us coming back around there. I mean, there was a time where it wasn't accepted for women to be in the workforce, and then there was a time where it wasn't acceptable for women to be a mom. Now I think it's come back full circle where you see more moms and dads just saying, I'm going to stay home. I mean, I have a lot of friends who the mom may be the full-time driven entrepreneur and the dad's staying home. And so I think sharing those duties together and doing what's right for you at the time. I mean, I really believe if you're going to have kids, raise the kids. I mean, otherwise don't have kids. And not everybody has to have kids, but I took time off work to be with my kids, and I worked less hours when my kids were small. And I did attend all of their activities, and I made sure that I set up my work so that I could do that. And I know that not everybody can, but those are things that you can work toward and be able to accomplish, especially as a driven person. If you're a very intentional individual, you can figure it out how to make it work, where you can delegate some things off yourself. You can say no to things in a season when your kids are small. You don't have to say no to it forever, but you're not going to serve on those boards when those kids are small. You're not going to go to all of those conferences all over the US when your kids are small. Everybody has to decide what success means to them. That's why I wrote the book, The Success Lie, because I think we all buy into this. We have to do more and more and work harder and harder and try to be this super mom or super dad. And you're not any good to anybody when you're living like that. It's a lie.
Yeah, and I'm glad you made that bridge to your work. Say more about your work.
So I was never expecting to be an author. I continued to have these thoughts coming into my mind about entrepreneurship and seeing other entrepreneurs like me who were overworked, overwhelmed, and just continue to take more and more on. And now that I know the natural driven nature of us, we chase and we chase and we chase after this next goal. We get that goal and we're excited, and then that completely just disappears and we've got to go after the next goal. And part of it is innate of who we are. But what I realized is that most of us are buying into this lie of success, that this is what we have to do. We may be wired to do more and more, but we also think that there's no other way. And society tells us that that's what we have to do. So that's why I wrote the book, because I too was in that situation, and it took a health condition for me to realize, wow, you are giving everything to everybody else. You have no margin in your life, and you're not taking care of yourself. And this is what's happening. And it took that realization for me, and then seeing it in everybody else. As I got balance and in my own life, as I took back control of my own life, as I put my own success tools in place, then people are asking me, how are you doing this? How are you having this balance? How do you have this huge family of 5 kids, and you've got this successful business, and you have all these entrepreneurial suits, and now you're an author. How are you doing this? And you have a joyful life. So that was the secret, really, of what came out of the success lies. I want other people to realize that they can have that. You've got to determine your own version of success. And it doesn't mean continuing to chase after what the world says success is.
So you don't listen to your body. Eventually you will. What happened?
I was actually on a plane flight to a conference, and I was really excited to go because I had just had so much going on at work. I hadn't had a break, and going to a conference and meeting with some colleagues was really going to be a nice reprieve for me. And going there, everything was great, had a great conference. And I was on my way back on the plane, and I saw the flight attendant coming toward me with the cart, like they were going to take the food order. And I thought to myself, oh, great, I'm hungry. And I started thinking about what I was going to order. And the next thing I knew, I looked down and I had a plate of food in front of me. And I went, what? And I looked back, and the flight attendant was a few rows behind me. And I had completely lost that space of time. And it scared me so much that I made a doctor's appointment when I got home to get it checked out. And I had been ignoring symptoms. Like you said, I wasn't listening to my body. I was putting things off until something like that happened. And I went into the doctor, and he said to me, we did a brain scan. I mean, I thought I had a brain tumor. I thought I was dying. And we got the scan back. I went in to see him, and he said, Janelle, he said, you don't have a tumor. You're okay. You're going to be fine. But I want you to know that I've seen you. I've observed you. He'd been my doctor since I was a little girl. He said, doing all of these things, being a super mom, being a single mom, taking such good care of your girls and growing this business. And he said, I've seen that this was going to come to this. And he said, you need to do drastic surgery on your schedule. You don't need surgery on your brain. You need drastic surgery on your schedule, because you cannot sustain this pace that you've created for yourself. So it was a wake-up call. That was such a scare to me. It was a wake-up call. And I began to look at my schedule really carefully and what I needed to change to be able to take back control of my life. And that was really that day. I'm like, okay, what are my most important priorities and what's got to go? And made some changes, some serious changes in my life.
Nothing like a good brain tumor scare to do that. What was wrong? I mean, you had a blackout, you were just dissociative?
Yeah, I had so much on my brain and I was never, ever shutting it off. And I think as a driven person, we tend to think that we can do all of these things and keep adding it on and not think we need rest. And the problem is I was never giving my brain and body the rest that it needed. And that was the problem. And then that was the solution, was really learning how to listen to my body. I began to meditate, which was really hard, impossible. But because we don't quit anything, Doug, I was not going to quit the fact that I couldn't sit still for 3 minutes.
When you really understand meditation, and I've seen meditation come and go 3 times in the 30 years as a psychologist. Oh, this is mindful, mindful. And then people figure out it is so freaking hard. And they stop, and then it kind of fades away. But Driven's, how'd you know it was what you needed? What was the early experiences when you first started? Like, there's something here. How'd you know? And you mentioned faith a couple of times in different ways. And did it tie into that sense of spirituality for you almost immediately?
Oh, definitely. I started to do reading. So when I was told by more than one person who loved me in my life that I needed to slow down. And I didn't listen to that for a really long time, because why would we need to slow down? We don't need to slow down. And when I started having that health issue and really looking at my life, that was one of the things that was recommended. I started reading about rest and rejuvenation and how important that was. And I ended up writing an article on rejuvenation being the key to leadership, because if we are not refueling our own bucket, we're not good to anybody else. And that's what I really realized. And it started with my girls. I thought, wow, if I don't want anything to happen to me. And that was one of their biggest fears. They'd lost their dad. That was the biggest fear, was the fear of abandonment. They thought something was going to happen to me. So I thought, nothing can happen to me. I need to take better care of myself. And so, yes, the spirituality was part of it. I've always been a believer, believed in God, and had prayed. And this just took it to a whole nother level, because I ended up taking my morning quiet time and made it into a morning success ritual, where it was prayer and meditation and breathing. And with the meditation part, I started with just a 5-minute, headspace, a guided meditation. Like I said, I couldn't even sit still through it. I thought, oh my word, how does anybody do this? And then I was able to, just with practice, realize, wow, I can actually watch my thoughts. I can just observe what's going on in my body and being quiet, and began to connect with my body, mind, and soul. And it helped me spiritually get closer to God too, because I realized growing up and in my drivenness that a lot of my conversations and prayer with God was telling him everything that was going on in my life and never listening. And it's a two-way relationship, just like every other relationship that we have. And so when I realized and just sat in prayer and meditation, just, God, what do you have to say to me? What do I need to hear today? And that just brought peace in my heart. And I felt like I got clarity with the things that I needed to say yes to and the things that I needed to say no to. And I've continued that quiet time every day. And now I spend time in meditation and prayer at least 30 minutes every day. And often throughout the day, just little pauses, because as I've watched my body throughout the day, I realize that it's natural for me to do that morning meditation and prayer time, and then just go like this throughout the day and not take any breaks throughout the day. And then I wonder why I'm amped up at the end of the day. So now in the last few years, I've been meditating for several years, but the last few years, I've now been adding these breathing breaks, these quiet breaks, and I'm teaching others in my community to do the same. For us busy entrepreneurs to just press pause for a minute in the middle of your day and just give yourself a timeout.
The transition of every entrepreneur is always framed in this sense that if I give up my fear that has been driving me for so long, will I be just as motivated or effective in my world? What's your experience with that?
I would say that that's very true, that I faced that and thought, am I going to lose my edge by slowing down? And when you actually commit to slowing down, you speed up, because you're just healthier. You're getting better sleep, you're having higher energy. And that's the most important thing I think that we can do, is really create that balance in our life between our drivenness, our striving toward what we're on this planet to achieve, which I believe we all have a gift. We all have a passion that we need to go after and leave the world a better place. And at the same time, we need to be willing to rest and to be really serious about that. And God created a Sabbath for a reason. He commanded us to rest. If even God doesn't need, but chose to rest, we should choose to rest as well.
Navy SEALs always say sleep is a weapon. It is
yes,
truly a weapon.
Truly.
And then something you said earlier about mind, body, and soul. It's driven, in my experience. We have a much more ambitious soul than our body can ever live up to. And in that breaking, realizing that we can't make God happy with our flesh, ever do it. And so we have to work within our flesh. That dynamic is, but you've done it successfully. And your daily practice, how much variance is it Monday through Friday? Are you 100% on?
Very close to 100% on, 7 days a week. That is just, I get up in the morning. So I typically go 30 minutes in the sauna and I meditate while I'm in the sauna. So that's my morning practice. And then I get my coffee and I go to my reading chair and I spend time there journaling and in prayer and reading something inspirational and planning my day. That's what I do every single morning. And it's made a phenomenal difference in my life.
Do you have an evening practice? How do you wind down?
I do. I have what I call my 8 p.m. rule, in that one of the things I really learned about myself was that I had a tendency just to keep going and going and going until it was time for bed. And then it was really hard to shut my mind off. So I experimented with this bookend to the day. I thought, well, if I start my morning off slow, if I can wind my evening down, just like we wind down from an exercise routine, why wouldn't that make the same difference and just be better for me and for my health and for my sleep? So at 8 o'clock at night, there is no more work talk, no more talk. And my husband's agreed to this. We do this together. There's no talk about challenging situations. That's not a time to talk about things that are going wrong with the kids that we want to try to help them with, or things in the business. And it's very tempting when you're together at 8 o'clock at night to then start talking about the problems of the day and brainstorming some of that stuff together. But we've committed to not doing that. We only talk about positive things. We wind down. I turn down the lights. We do relaxing activities and have my cup of tea, have that evening ritual. And that really makes a difference. And then typically we read before bed and shut the lights out about 10 p.m.
But the road to get here was bumpy and full of pain, correct?
Incredibly so. And I certainly don't do it perfectly. And there's times where I get really off track, just like everyone. I mean, there's so many challenges in life. And the most recent one was losing my dad last year. I lost him last summer, and he's my hero. And on his 91st birthday of last year, I interviewed him about being an entrepreneur. I had no idea that he was going to pass away that year. And when they came over for dinner on his birthday, something in me, I just thought, I need to talk to my dad. And I said, Dad, would you do a fireside chat with me? Would you let me record you? And so he had no questions or anything. And we just talked. And then last June, he passed away. And it's been really hard when the most stable man in your life, when I didn't have that as an adult, to have that person, that rock in your life leave. It was really, really hard, a lot harder than I thought it was going to be. It knocked me off my feet. And I think with my mom and being that person who's caring for her, and they'd been married almost 69 years, and watching her grief and helping her navigate that, along with trying to deal with my own grief in the new way, as my new self, where I wasn't stuffing down everything the way that I used to, and everything is okay, and I'm just going to go on to the next thing, but really feeling everything that was going on in my body. I was determined to do that and not fall into those old patterns. But still, grief takes time. It hasn't even been a year yet. And that certainly set me back. And for a while, I put aside some things just to allow myself to just be what I needed to be. If I just needed to sit there and cry in my morning time, then that's what I did.
Just be where you are at.
Exactly. Right.
The body knows what to do. We just need to get out of the way and give it the conditions that it knows how to heal in. And then it's magic. It just happens.
Isn't that so true? I think it was so phenomenal for me, Doug, that I actually got certified in trauma-informed yoga and meditation. It made such a difference for me that I thought, I want to use these things as I'm working with other people, because it's been so helpful for me. I want to know more about it. I want to know why it's worked for me and so I'm trying these things before I really understood what was behind them. And you're so right, Doug, our body has the wisdom, but we so often don't tune into that.
How do we find you?
What are you the go-to for?
Well, you can go to thesuccesslie.com, and a good start would be to get my book, The Success Lie. That's a great tool that anybody can pick up through me directly, or it's on Amazon as well. There's an audio version that I actually record, and a lot of people will say they just take me along in their car with them, and that's been really helpful. And then my husband, Graham, and we started a leadership development company a number of years ago, and we have a leadership mastermind, and it's for highly driven entrepreneurs that want to come together and really that iron sharpens iron component, really help them be better. And that whole, the mindfulness piece of making sure that your mindset is where it needs to be. And I found that's one of the top things that successful entrepreneurs, even if they have everything else successful, that they struggle with their mindset and success habits like my morning success ritual and other intentional things to be able to put in place as well. And then your health, which is such a big component that we've been talking about. So really focusing on the mind, body, soul, and how we can really improve the people that we can be our very best selves so that we can lead others better. And I really think if we can come together as a leadership community of high level driven entrepreneurs, and I can help them really take control of their life and have their lives really at this next high level performance. Imagine the ripple effect on their families, on their communities, on their companies, on this world. That's what I'm passionate about. Graham and I both working with entrepreneurs to help them get there.
Does Graham identify as driven?
Yes, he does.
Give us the one sentence. What makes a driven couple successful?
I would say the challenge that you are to each other to be the best version of yourself. So Graham is not afraid to challenge me and encourage me, and I do the same for him. So really pushing each other to be everything we're called to be. And that really then becomes an extension with this group. You got to be brave to come into this group because you're going to be called on the carpet. It's a no zone of you're not living the life that you're proclaiming you're living. And let's talk about why and how we get back there. And then just being there for each other, being that community, like you talk about, the tribe, that's so important to come around you and to be there. And yeah, Graham and I, you might be familiar with the Colby, which is a quick start.
yeah.
He's driven entrepreneur. So I'm an 8 and he's a 10 quick start. Yeah. So we come up with all kinds of ideas and we drive people crazy with all the ideas.
But you have somebody clean your house, right?
Yes. Well, we need somebody to clean our business, to clean our house, to keep us organized, to keep us on track.
Yeah, I always say my husband and I'm a 7, he's a 9. I'm like, we drink each other's Kool-Aid all day long.
Yes. Yes.
We will have you both back on and he'll give us his insights in being married to a driven woman.
Oh, yeah. It would be super fun. We would love that, Doug.
As a driven man, I have grown to truly appreciate how hard it is to be a driven woman. I just wow. I work hard and I get accolades. You guys work hard, you get judged. I mean, it's wild.
Yep.
Right.
How it leaks out. But how he supports you in your drivenness, I'd love to hear that.
Yes, he's been absolutely amazing. I never would have gotten my book written if it wasn't for him, for sure.
How long have you guys been together?
14 years.
You got some bumps and bruises on the way, and I'm sure.
Yeah, we have some stories to tell for sure. It's been a wild ride and he's my adventure buddy. We have a lot of fun together too. And I think that's the highlight of it. Neither one of us is afraid of adventure and doing new things. And I think that's not without its struggles, but it's made it really fun.
It's never a dull moment with driven couples.
That's so true.
If it is dull for a minute, somebody will change that really quick.
That's exactly right. And, I would be bored if I've been with other men and Graham he drives me crazy, but I would be bored out of my mind without somebody like him in my life. So it's perfect.
It's becoming more and more clear that mismatched couples where you have one that's extremely driven and one that's not so much, it's a very difficult struggle. Particularly if the woman is very highly driven and the man is not. It's a very interesting challenge.
You really have to learn if that's the case, and there's a lot of marriages like that. You have to really, again, find that common ground with those things where you share values and you're on the same page, and then have to appreciate each other's differences and what each one contributes. Because there's not a lot of people that are driven. There's a lot more that are not. And we need to learn to interact, and we need those that are not driven in our life because they help keep us stable and grounded, and they help us get the work done. And
it is their world. I I mean, it's
It's
their world, you know, you can buck against the system. And there's a lot of authority in this world you need to respect. My next book title is really, it's sheep, and everyone has some sheep in them, meaning that we subscribe to a narrative and don't want to look at ourselves. But by nature, drivens are wolves. We are wolves. And it is our opportunity, though, to become shepherds. I think that's what your leadership is doing. It's beautiful things.